Warning, this video may challenge your knowledge of history. Hello, I'm Dr. John Woodring and welcome to Teacher Bites. This video is going to focus on two individuals who contributed to American history but have largely been forgotten because they were considered inconvenient and therefore purposely forgotten. Most of you were probably unfortunate enough to have learned history from textbooks like these. Just so you know, there are three things that you never really want to see made. First is sausage. Second, laws. And third, textbooks, especially history textbooks. There's a perception that many people have that history never changes. That is nothing but a collection of dates and facts in a chronological order, and that it never changes. But that's far from the truth. History is always changing. And the reason it changes is because historians are always finding new information from different sources that heretofore had never been explored, and therefore providing different views of how historical events took place. The first person we're going to discuss is Dr. Margaret Chung, the first Chinese-American woman to become a medical doctor in the United States. Dr. Chung later was instrumental in the women's suffrage movement, helping ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, giving women the right to vote. In the days before World War II, Dr. Chung became friends with many military pilots and entertained them in her home for dinners and other events. The pilots affectionately called Dr. Chung Mom, while Dr. Chung called them her fair-haired bastards, because she considered them her sons, yet she was an unmarried woman. In 1937, when the Japanese invaded China, Dr. Chung wanted to go to China to become a frontline surgeon for the Chinese army. However, others had a different idea. They got her to use her contacts with the American pilots to secretly recruit them for the American Volunteer Group, otherwise known as the Flying Tigers. It was the Flying Tigers who provided critical intelligence and instructed Allied pilots on how to defeat Japanese pilots when World War II broke out in the Pacific in 1941. During the war, Dr. Chung often entertained servicemen in her home for dinners, and later wrote to her sons and gave them Christmas gifts, and even hosted their families while her sons were away serving in the military. Dr. Chung even hosted Hollywood celebrities, to include John Wayne and Ronald Reagan. Others that Dr. Chung hosted in her home included high-ranking politicians and military officers, including Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Forces, and one of his chief lieutenants, Admiral William F. Halsey, otherwise known as Bull Halsey. Dr. Chung used her political and military connections to get the Navy to create the Women Accepted to Volunteer Emergency Services, or the WAVES. It was the WAVES, along with the Women's Army Corps, or WACs, that helped pave the way for women to have military careers today. The next person we're going to talk about is Bayard Rustin. Rustin was one of the chief organizers of the Southern Leadership Christian Conference. This group was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and was instrumental in the struggle for civil rights for African Americans in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s. Rustin was one of the individuals who influenced Dr. King to adopt nonviolent tactics in combating violent racism during the civil rights struggle. Rustin also helped organize the 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his iconic I Have a Dream speech. So what makes the contributions of Dr. Chung and Bayard Rustin Inconvenient History? Many suffragettes, including Gail Laughlin, Annie Tinker, and Alice Dunbar Nelson, were either lesbians or transgender. These women fought for political rights because they believed that political rights would lead to acceptance for their sexuality. Dr. Chung, who actually liked to be called Mike, often dressed in masculine clothing, gambled, drank, cussed like a sailor, and engaged in other activities that would be considered at the time unladylike. Suspecting she was one of them, many lesbians became patients of Dr. Chung. It was also Dr. Chung's suspected sexuality that kept her from going to China to serve as a doctor, and then later joining the Waves, the organization she worked hard to help create. Bayard Rustin actually had 3 strikes against him. The first strike was when he was in college in the 1930s. He joined the Young Communist League because he believed the communists would help African Americans achieve civil rights. Well, of course, later during the Lavender Scare and the Red Scare in the 1950s, 1960s, during the height of the Cold War, it was believed by many Americans that communist, always a communist, even though Rustin disavowed the group and left because he became disillusioned for their support of Joseph Stalin and his brutal ways of leadership. The second strike against Rustin was he held pacifist beliefs. Therefore, he refused to sign up for the military draft during World War II and was later arrested for this. And the third strike? He was an openly gay man. And in fact, in the early 1950s, he was even arrested for homosexual behavior. 2 individuals, because of their mannerisms, their pacifism, their political affiliations that they later disavowed, and their sexuality, became inconvenient people and therefore have been purposely erased, their exploits purposely erased, so we cannot learn the contributions they have made to help make this nation the great nation that it is. If you liked this video and found it thought-provoking, click the like button. And if you want more content like this, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.